Welcome back to the Running on Grass podcast. I'm your co-host, Logan Pribino, here with my co-host, Eamon O'Toole. How are things in Wyoming, Eamon?
It's beautiful here, Logan. We got almost an inch of rain last night in Dixon, Wyoming, and I am over in Cheyenne, Wyoming. You can see this sweet hotel room I've got here that I'm sitting in. And yeah, I'm here for the Summer Business Family Farm Alliance meeting. They represent over 70% of Western irrigated water. And so we had a great meeting getting together yesterday evening, and then we start our business meeting a little later today.
Awesome. So how long are you in town
Just
for?
today and tomorrow, and then I've got to get back to the ranch. So it should be another fun day in Cheyenne. And tomorrow, I guess we're gonna kind of do a group effort and try and make the rodeo and see what's going on over at the main park tomorrow.
Awesome. I thought you just, would take off 2 weeks for Cheyenne Frontier Days.
And I don't know how these people do it. I'm friends with a volunteer over here, and it's 10 days every day he's over there. And I don't know how I'm pretty certain the state of Wyoming's business, or at least government side, totally shuts down because everybody that I know that works for the government works over and volunteers at Cheyenne Frontier Days for this week.
They probably just need bodies.
Yeah, it takes an army to get through that thing. So, well, what have we got on our plate today?
Well, we just got back from the Western Ranch Managers Group. I'd like to hit a lot on that. You and I think, learned a lot from that quick trip, just people we talked to and all that. And then I know you had a field day with Burke Teichert visiting. I figured we'd hit on 2 of those to be kind of our big topics of discussion. And a lot of insight on that WRM. Wayne Fashholtz was there when I hit on some of the history of the group and hit on some history of Wayne as well.
Yeah, I think that's more than enough. You and I could sit and talk for hours and hours or probably all day about the different things that we saw at WRM. That was really a great meeting. It only lasted a day, and I just was absorbing everything that came in, and I took more notes in a couple hours at that meeting than I will take at 3 or 4 different meetings.
Yeah. And then we AI'd, which is why I didn't make your field day. So why don't I give our sponsors, Eastco, a shout, and then I can just go over quickly what we were doing with the AI project and then hit into WRM. But first of all, shout out to Eastco. Eastco is a rancher-owned, rancher-focused insurance agency specializing in PRF, LRP, and annual forage. Any rancher anywhere in the nation has to manage the risk and operational costs that come with below-average precipitation. PRF insurance was designed to manage this risk and can and should be customized for every ranch. Be that in Nevada or Nebraska, Eastco works to understand, accurately map, and provide personalized data to any rancher we work with so they can make an informed decision about coverage. Visit Eastco Group or email info@eastcogroup.com to learn more. And I just cashed one of my PRF
That's
checks.
awesome. Yeah, I get emails on that stuff all the time and how we're sitting, and those guys are so good. They just keep everybody up to date and let you know where you're sitting with how much you've invested into the program and what's coming back to you. So Jen, thank you. JW, thank you. Appreciate you guys.
So I missed the field day because we were AIing some of our first calf heifers. We chose 5 sires. One was Quigley, Jet Fleck. We wanted to get some heterosis in there, and we also added some Mashona there as well. So that was kind of the idea. And our herd is small enough now that some of these changes will ripple through the herd a little bit quicker. But, and we've talked about this, I'm not a huge fan of AI just because it's not a natural process. Have you ever seen a bull mount a cow?
Yeah, every day.
And the hubris of man to think that he can improve on that process. Who looks at that and be like, I can do better.
You know what? That one bull, I can get him over all those cows because I like him more than that one over there. What breed of bulls are you using?
It was so a little Fleckvey cross. Quigley was some Simmental influence, and then the Mashona. So kind of some unique combinations just to complement our Hereford Angus.
That's really interesting. What is this Mashona? Where's that from in the world?
It's a African breed. So one of Burke's ideas is what is the worst day for a cow on your ranch? And that happened on Monday. It was 103 degrees. So we have fairly mild winters, but we can be 100, day after day this time of year. And so he didn't recommend Mashona in particular, but he said I would really focus on some heat tolerance if that's that's kind of your crutch, and it definitely is for us. As you know, we can get pretty darn
Yeah,
hot.
I thought it was hot just being there during branding season. That was more than enough for me. I don't know how you do it in
Yeah, I
the
think it was
summertime.
85. I don't know either, and we don't have there. As you know, there's not a tree around. We have a couple pastures with trees, but to grow a tree in Western Nebraska, you have to water the darn thing every week, so they don't just occur. So shade is tough to
Right.
find.
So being a non-AI guy and being able to or talk yourself into getting into doing AI, what led you there? And is the idea just for the heterosis, or did you see other opportunities there?
Mainly for the heterosis. Jeremy Martin, who is our nutritional consultant, really helped us with this project. He's been wanting us to do something like this for years, and we're going to keep a lot of bulls out of the sires as well, just so we don't have to go out and buy a $15,000-$20,000 bull. So it was kind of a way to actually save money in that regard. And one of the things is we just wanted to get some depth to our genetics, and none of those bulls are new bulls. They're not like the curve benders and these new trends that these improved breeders are chasing. We tried not to get into that. So we tried to keep it simple, stupid.
Right. How many do AI?
200.
So not a terrible hard amount, easy enough work, not enough to kill your crew and make everybody absolutely miserable for weeks. And
Yeah, it really wasn't too bad. And I know you guys did a lot of it, and it can be a lot of work, but I will keep you guys updated as to the results.
yeah, I'm excited to see what those calves look like. We did AI about 500 a year for 7 years. And what our strategy was we needed to make a better cow herd. And we couldn't really afford to go purchase that cow herd, so we did it internally. And then once we saw that we had those mamas the way we wanted them, for the most part, we stopped AIing, and so we stopped getting into that stuff. And it really was a lot of work for us. We were gathering forest permits to come pull cedars, and we had built specific pastures. We built a set of corrals up in the mountains just to AI. So we did a lot of work to do it, and it got our cow herd where we want. Now we have facilities all over the ranch that work great for preconditioning and branding and things like that too. But that's was our main reason for doing it. But I think there's a few appropriate times to do it, and sounds like you've got a plan and not just going at it blindly.
Yeah, one and done. And TJ and Jeremy did. I didn't pick a sire, so shout out to those guys for coming up with that project.
Yeah, that's really
But anyway,
cool.
let's hit on WRM. You want to tell us a little bit of background on that?
Well, I'll just explain briefly what WRM. So Western Ranch Managers, it's several of the larger ranch operators in the pretty much Western United States mostly. And we get together usually once, maybe twice a year. And I haven't been on it for a long time, but we've had meetings that I've been to in Washington State. And this year it was in Laramie. And we had it up at the Matador one time. And those are all the ones I've been to. Like I said, haven't been on it a long time, but really everybody's just getting together, and it's these kind of some of the geniuses of the industry sit down in a room together, and we all talk about what we're thinking about, what we're trying to learn about, what we know we don't know, and how do we learn more about that. And what I find the best part about it is you go in that room and you're not even close to the smartest person in that
Yeah,
room. There are some really sharp characters, and then also these guys are wondering the same things you and I are talking about. How do I use AI on my ranch? There was one guy doesn't even he downloaded Chat GPT while we were at the meeting. So pretty
the other
cool.
AI.
The other AI. That's right. So what did you get out of it?
Oh, man, I gotta sit by Wayne Fastschultz at dinner. That was a honor, a privilege. I got a lot out of it. Took an entire page of notes. I did miss the ranch tour aspect. I think that's kind of a cool part, and it gets you thinking about ranching. I understand why we able to do it this time, but man, we went up to the Matador. I thought that was wonderful. And then you didn't make it to Hawaii, but we went to two other ranches that really just got you thinking. And then when we had the discussion later, it was just even higher level because you were engaged,
Yeah,
basically.
I went the year after the Hawaii trip, I think, and I'm sure jealous that I didn't make that one. I'm sure I can't get my wife to most meetings, but I could have gotten her to Hawaii, I think.
There were a lot of wives that attended.
Boy, there weren't very many the other day in Laramie, Wyoming.
Not so many in Laramie.
Well, it was really good. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you and Wayne talked about and some of the notes you took down? I wrote them down on the napkin just so I could remember them a little better, but I didn't. I should have taken a picture of all the stories and things he said. So give us a little bit about what you and Wayne talked about at dinner.
Yeah, so Wayne Fashholtz, responsible for managing the Padlock for many, many years and managing it quite well, I might add. He founded the group in 1988, and it was more for ranch managers that were not landowners like you and I. So the original group was just exclusively ranch managers who are non-owners versus like the family operators like you and me. So it was originally for them. John Maddox was the one who got me in, and he's made that comment to me. He said they're just rolling out some of the family owned operations. And so Wayne started in 1988. There's some other guys that he started with. I'm looking at my notes here. Yeah, the Bob with ZX Ranch and some Stits. Yeah, there were many other attendees kind of over the year, but they used to meet a couple times a year. They would meet in Mesa, Arizona once a year, and then the Nugget in Reno, they'd meet there as
Yeah,
well.
I thought it was interesting. I've been to the Nugget for a few different meetings. It's a really, really nice casino hotel. And there's a old sheep rancher who built that hotel named John Esquagua. And
Really?
he's passed away now, but it's a sheep rancher, and I've always thought when I've been in that hotel, and it is really nice, and, compared to everything we have in Wyoming, we don't have casinos and things like that the way they do in Nevada, and he went top tier, and I'm thinking, how does this sheep rancher go to his banker and say, "What do you think about starting putting in a casino? Just shooting
Yeah,
from the
that
hip
is.
here, I got an idea."
It probably worked out a lot better than sheep ranching in the long
Maybe his
run.
banker was like, "This was what we've been waiting for. We've been waiting
Yeah,
for
we've been waiting for this idea.
we know the numbers on casinos work a lot better than the sheep business."
Yeah. One of the things Wayne and I talked about was when he took over the Padlock, what that looked like. And when he took over the Padlock, it had 125 employees.
My
And I know they're, and I know they're running over 10,000 cows now. I assumed that they were at that level at that point, but I really don't
Well, it was
know.
probably putting up hay and pitching out hay all winter, and as you know, hay crews and all that stuff just takes a whole nother level of employee management, and I think they've gotten away from a lot of that up there. I need to go up and do some I need to visit with Trey Patterson on several different things after spending the day with Burke yesterday. He brought up Trey, and I have several things to call him and ask him about. But I did see Trey was on Facebook talking about another ranch they're buying in Montana, the Padlock
Well,
is.
well, tell me more about that. I didn't see that.
I just saw it was them talking about, how they manage their cows, and it was a bit of a ad, I guess, for Padlock on Facebook, and Trey mentioned that they were buying a place, and I don't know my geography of Montana great, so I'm not sure exactly where it is, but it sounded like they were gonna buy another 900 cow ranch in Montana.
Wow. Cool. Very cool.
So
One of the other things that Wayne talked about, and I thought this was cool, he managed the Gracie Creek Ranch before he went to the Padlock. He also managed Leachman in Montana for a short period of time as well. And he said when he took over Gracie Creek and Padlock, when he took over, it was a drought early on. And he uses that as an opportunity to change things. And I really like when people talk about things like drought as an opportunity versus the opposite of that. And he said it was really easy to be like, oh, well, we're going to go graze these hay fields because it's super dry and we need the grazing now versus, a complete overhaul. So he really credited the fact that he took over two places during a drought. He was able to make rapid change quickly because he had the perfect excuse with Mother
yeah,
Nature.
nothing gets you thinking out of the box like a tough situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the other things, he was really a people-focused leader. He talked a lot about being the employer of choice, keeping employees around, keeping them happy, treating them as individuals while building a real
Yeah,
team.
and I don't know if anybody that's listening's ever been around Wayne, but he is a soft-spoken, caring, kind of guy, and he's got a great laugh and just, the kind of guy that fills a room full of smiles and laughs all the time. So I enjoy every time you get to see Wayne, and I saw him in the parking lot on the way in, and he, just brought up some stuff that was kind of personal to my life that I didn't even know he knew about, and that's the kind of guy he is. He just kind of remembers every detail about a person, and when he sees you one on one, he'll talk to you about it. So
Yeah, almost the opposite of the stereotypical cowboy.
yeah, yeah. And I think another thing that we shouted out to Wayne is that the Padlock won the Leopold Award as well. Bef I think the year before Ladder Ranch won the Leopold Award, and we were able to have dinner with Wayne. That's kind of a tradition in Wyoming, at least, that when you win, you have dinner with the year before's winner. And I didn't get to sit next to Wayne. My dad and mom were down at the end of the table visiting with Wayne during dinner in Cody, Wyoming, where we received the award, but we did get to visit. And Wayne still has brought that up to me also in the past of, hey, remember that dinner we had at that steakhouse? And, it's just like, how many dinners does Wayne Fashholt go to with all sorts of great, interesting people? And then he remembers going to dinner with us 15 years ago or whatever that was. So,
Yeah, he's got a great
yeah, tell
memory.
us a little bit some of the stories that he brought up at dinner that we can repeat.
Sure. One of the funny things was he said that our current group is pretty mild. He said that they were a little wilder back in the 80s and 90s. They'd bring beer on the bus for the ranch tour, and then they'd chalk the tires on the bus and put their initials next to them, and they'd gamble on whose would go straight up. And he just referenced that we're a little bit too intellectual compared to the previous
It was
groups.
probably a good opportunity for those guys to get off the ranch, and we all look at it like, if we're gonna take time off the ranch, we better get something out of this.
Yeah, I think for them it was more of a vacation. And they mentioned going to Mesa and hanging out by the pool and having a grand
Yeah,
old.
well, good for those guys, and they certainly started something that, you know, I think somebody brought it up in the meeting about how many businesses have changed and how many millions of dollars have been allocated the right way instead of lost opportunities, basically, because of that meeting and the differences that it's made on so many big ranches.
Yeah, I think it's helped a lot of operators and a lot of money saved down the road.
Yeah, we're talking about a lot of things that were everybody in the industry's wondering at these meetings, AI for one, not breeding cattle, but using your computer or your phone to figure out whatever process. I wrote down about probably a dozen different things I'm starting to look up and build on AI just from that meeting because of all the thinking that was going on in that room. And then we talked about grassroots carbon and Cultivo and these different carbon markets. What else was brought up, Logan? Some of the big ones.
The AI was the biggest one. We'd take a vote on the breakout sessions that we discuss, and the AI and technology in general was by far the biggest one. And there were a couple presentations about what some of these managers are doing with AI, and it's just allowing you to do a lot of work quickly or quicker with AI. Jen had a project where she evaluated the basal cover of her pastures compared to in the last 26 years, I believe, to see the progress that they've made on their own home ranch and then some of their new lease properties, and was able to show that they've really made, with their rotational grazing system, has really made leaps and bounds, in particular on their home ranch, Wessick
Yeah.
Carson.
And I looked at that and I thought, why have I not done that on my operation to see where I'm grazing better and where I need to focus more? So I wrote that down in my notes, and I probably have a half a dozen pages of notes that I took from this meeting. And there was a ranch manager that came up and he started talking about, some of these huge ranches have 20, 30, 40 vehicles, and they've got hunting operations. They've got different ones have meat packing operations. They have, and then they have their cattle operations and hunting operations and everything. So anyways, he was discussing how complicated it is to keep up with maintenance on all these different things, from four-wheelers, motorcycles, ranch pickups, trailers, everything you can think of that's on a ranch. And when you start going to a ranch, and it's amazing how much stuff gets accumulated, especially on ranches that have been around for a long time. Or as some of these guys are buying more ranches, you buy the neighbor's ranch, then you go buy the next neighbor's ranch, and all of a sudden you've accumulated another 20 pickups and two purchases. So doing the maintenance scheduling, and said we used to sit around in boardroom meetings and talk about this vehicle or that vehicle and if we should trade it or sell it or fix it or whatever was going on. He said we don't have to have that discussion at all anymore because we just know. we put it into AI. Every vehicle is known and we have all the details in there. And it just tells us what the likelihood that this vehicle is going to last X amount more time. And so as soon as something comes up, we don't even talk about that in meetings anymore. I just take care of it because I have something that's figured that out for me.
Yeah, that was a great use case for it. And, it was clearly one of their weak spots. And that is, gosh, with one of those things with ranching, if you're not careful, you just end up with gobs of old rundown
Yeah,
equipment.
we have a four-wheeler. I just traded a couple four-wheelers last week. Well, we were in Laramie, and I had one that I traded in, and we had another one that was exactly like it, and it kind of started wearing out first. So we just started robbing parts off of that one. It became a parts machine. And then once I traded that four-wheeler in, we took that and put it into our metal bin because I was like, we do not need this thing sitting around at the shop to rob parts off that we don't have anything to put them on anymore. But
Yeah.
it's easy to let those things sit around.
Yeah, it is. And, AI is helping some people with that. We also saw Walker Millhouse did a walkthrough of an accounting software project that he used AI to create. I thought that was amazing. They were using an existing accounting software and they didn't like some things about it. And he was able to just create a version of it that included some of the things that they wanted to
Yeah, I
see.
think I was sitting next to you during the meeting and I leaned over and I said, you're like, yeah, I've got a lot of this stuff. There's some really great stuff here that I'll be able to use or it'll help me. It's kind of got me thinking. And I said, for somebody like me that isn't a finance or economics guy, this is amazing.
Yeah, and I believe one of the key features was like there was a dashboard where you can interface with your accounting software via conversation. And if you're not, and I was just having this conversation with a friend and my dad, who are all analytically minded. I need the numbers on the spreadsheet, and those make sense to me. But I'm not the typical farmer or rancher, and so I think one of the keys of this software was you can interact with your accounting software conversationally. Like, what did I spend on my cows this month? What are my steers worth today? I need to see the numbers in a spreadsheet. That's just how my mind works. But I think for a lot of guys, conversational is the way to go. And that's what that software was accomplishing.
Yeah. And you've got the name Corey. What was her last name?
Corey Carmen.
Corey Carmen talked to us about her Cull cow business, and they've been able to purchase Cull cows and then create a higher value product out of Cull cows that was very interesting.
Yeah,
And
I did really enjoy her presentation. And they were grass finishing yearlings, like everyone did. But the whole industry has shifted to away from buying yearlings because of the price and the premiums involved, and went to grass finishing coal cows. And not just Corey, she kind of made it sound like this was the new standard for the grass finishing industry.
yeah, and they seem to have found some opportunities, not just in a beef stick, but in finer cuts that people, prefer at fancy restaurants that they're getting out of these Cull cows, and people seem to really like it. So that was very interesting presentation that she put together. And I think that, in fact, Burke talked about it yesterday to me. He said, you have to find added value for your Cull cows. And
Yes.
you and I have done different things over the years, like turning those into summer calvers. If you can give them one more opportunity to get bred. And if they do, then that increases the value of that cow. If you can get her bred one more time and she goes from being a Cull cow to a bred cow now.
Yeah, and it took a while for the people in the room to realize that they're cutting steaks out of these cows. This isn't hamburger and meat sticks. This is, steaks that they serve in top-end restaurants on the West Coast.
Yeah, I know it took me a bit because when she started getting into that, I just couldn't pull my mind away from jerky and meat sticks and things like.
Yeah, it took a lot of people, those guys from Colorado, they were like, wait, what are you doing now? What, you can't do that.
Well, I think
She
we have to remember not every Cull cow is Ted. Some Cull cows are heiferettes, and so they don't have the age on them. And we didn't get super into the detail on what cows they're cutting up to be finer in restaurant steaks, but I would surmise that a lot of those are probably those 2, 3, 4-year-old cows and not as many of the 8, 9, 10-year-old cows.
Yeah, I would agree. And even like she mentioned Force of Nature, which is a larger brand in the in the space, they're now advertising that, meat from older cows is actually better flavor and better for
Yeah,
you.
and I think one of the other ranchers in the room mentioned, he said, that has a much stronger taste. Whether you like that or don't like that, those older cows do have a stronger taste to on their meat.
Yeah, and in France, there is a premium for I think it's 3 or 4 year old cow meat is their top end product. So there is some cultural relevance behind it. And we're kind of biased here in the United States towards the younger animals. My dad told me one time, he said, "Your great great grandfather would think you're crazy for keeping hamburger from a steer. The best hamburger comes from an old bull or an old cow."
Maybe it's because what we've grown up on, but I prefer hamburger from a steer or a, finished heifer, maybe not finished, but, a younger animal. And when we had our own bulls, we would usually, when we would semen test and when one failed, we would take that in and that would be the hamburger that we would feed our crew on for the summer. And I've eaten a lot of old bull meat and it's fine, but I think personally, if
For the
I
yearling.
would prefer a yearling if I have the choice.
Makes sense. And it was kind of, and Corey shared the numbers with it too. And it brings challenges. Uniformity is one thing you certainly lose when you buy cull cows. Traceability is also a thing that you lose when you use cull cows. But numbers wise, she said you just load up in the fall when they're cheap. And, financially, it's been a real victory for them.
Yeah, she said spring and fall were the opportunities because as ranchers, we're not generally getting rid of cows in the middle of the summer when we've got bulls out where if we didn't get them cold in the spring after calving or during calving or in the fall after we prick checked, then we're usually not messing around with them. What she did also say, I thought that was funny, was that she did not realize she was getting into the cow calving business because about 10% of cows that are called open are actually bred.
Yeah, think about how those pencil free calves in today's market.
Yeah, that's a great
That's a big
opportunity.
deal. Yeah, that's a grand. And she did say 10%, didn't
Yeah,
she?
if you're doing it on scale, like, let's say that's 1,000 cows even, and I think they're operating on they said a truckload a week. So,
One or two, yeah.
yeah, 1 or 2 loads a week. So it's scale for sure. And 10% of that's a calf check.
Yeah, that is a calf jack.
That's bigger than a lot of average ranches. That's more calves than a lot of average ranches produce in a year.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I did think the other comment I love to follow the grass-fed stuff. I dabble in it for fun. Like I said, I spent 10 years in California. It just comes with the territory. But one comment she made is that the grass-fed market for her is 1 or 2 truckloads a week. And that's kind of the max. And it's kind of crazy that grass-fed industry it kind of got a little bit of life breathed into it when Michael Pollan was writing for the New York Times, and it helped it a little bit, but it's just stayed at that pretty small level. Somewhat surprisingly to me, I would have expected that industry to grow a lot more than it has. And one of the reasons Allen Nation thought that it was going to. So it's just fascinating that it's just not really scaled at all.
Yeah, the palate of the American consumer is that we've all had corn fed and grass fed is fine. And everybody will try and wants grass fed once. But if you've had corn fed, you're like, man, my palate does like the corn fed more. And that's, I think, more in the American consumer than it is anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, and I think for the grass-fed deal, what they're learning, and they're shifting to the cull cows because of this, to grass finish a yearling heifer or steer it's significantly more expensive than grain finishing them at scale. And the premium needed to get that premium animal is a lot. It's quite a bit. And I just think that part of it is the consumer just unwilling to pay the premium necessary to grass finish a yearling.
Yeah. Burke told me a story yesterday about a guy who had switched over and he was just tired of paying fertilizer prices and tired of spraying. And he really didn't like the big picture of how bad he thought that was for him and his operation to do that. And so he went to cover crops and started doing all this stuff. And then he had army worms coming over from the neighbors and they were starting to get close to his field. And he told his wife, he's like, I think we're going to have to spray. I don't want to do it, but I think we're going to have to. And his wife said, nope, don't do it. You said you weren't going to do it. And so he didn't. And then kind of went on about this for another week or so and back and forth with his wife. And so ultimately he did not do it. And then the army worms came over and they stopped almost at the fence line. I mean, they came in a little bit, but they said, your place is just not a place they want to be because of what you've done with your cover cropping. And all your neighbors have not moved to that direction. And you've created a place that they don't want to live. And it was just total satisfaction for him to make him understand what he was doing was right. And I think when you go back to grass-fed and those kind of things, that's what we're doing is if we get away from all these high cost fertilizers and sprays and stuff we're doing, it'll actually be more defensible on your property.
Yeah, I've definitely seen and observed pests come in and wreck, damaged crops and plants. It's not the healthy ones. It's kind of like the flies on your cow herd. The flies are not uniformly distributed amongst your cows. It's always those ragged ones that are affected. And then you got these real slick mamas that have, a fraction of them on. The pests are somehow attracted to issues, I guess.
Yeah, and
But that's a good story.
well, I think to go back one more level, I think that if we were to take a lot of our farmland and it went back to some of those prairie grasslands that we all have heard so many stories about before the West was settled and plowed up, that would create that grassland culture in the United States if America wanted to go back in that direction. But it would take a pretty major lift and animals would have to become very profitable.
Yeah. We're actually reseeding an 80 back to grass this fall or spring, probably most likely.
Yeah. And what drove that decision?
It is a very sandy 80 that it's on a new property that we purchased. It's in 2 fields, so it's like a 60 and a 20 acre patch, and it's just in the middle of nowhere. And it's going back to grass. And maybe just it's going to be a full half set of it.
Say that one more time so I can fully understand. So you're taking an 80 and
farm ground,
a farm
farm
ground,
ground,
and
we're going to reseed it to native grasses.
okay. And what are your natives there?
It'll be sand blue stem, little blue. It always propagates in these reseeding projects. Blue grandma is an important grass for us. Indian grass, we'll throw some of that in there. That's kind of the peak climax vegetation species. Just a lot of, large sandhills bunch grasses.
Okay, that's cool. Well, I was so impressed, and I've said this before, Logan knows so much more about grass, and I'm trying to get on board as I slowly trickle my way into the grass world. I've lived on it and it's made my living my entire life, but I just didn't know much about the piece in the middle between the cow and the ranchers. So this has gone a long ways in my education, but when I was out visiting Logan, he was explaining to me how grass works and how the root systems work, and this could be 1,000-year-old clump of grass right here, and it's just boggled my mind. If you want, I'd sure happily give a little bit of the information that I got from Burke Teichert yesterday.
Yeah, let's hear all about the field day and your time. So you kind of had 2 things. You had a field day with Halter and Grassroots Carbon, and Burke was there, and then you had a private tour with Burke as well. Let's hear all about it.
So Burke works for Understanding Ag now. He's retired, was a ranch manager for Deseret on their Rex Ranch operation in Nebraska, and he has been to my place. This was the 3rd time he's been to Ladder, and giving me ideas. The first time he came out, we were talking about AI and cattle because that's what I was trying to do at the time, and he helped me figure out which bulls to use, and he's kind of moved to a place where he doesn't see a place unless it has a very specific operation or need like what you've done. But he's generally not a big fan of AI, and he likes to just let nature do its thing. And same with breeding heifers. That's his big thing is turn out every heifer you got. The fertile ones will rise to the top. So he's got a lot of great insights, and he's been to a million ranches all over the world and just great stuff. But we talked about, go ahead.
When he came 10 years ago, I told him, I was like, I'm only getting 80 something of my replacement heifers bred. And I told him, I think it's a big problem. And he said, it is a big problem. You're getting too many bred. Like your target should be 70%. And I'm like,
yeah.
whoa.
And I had the same thing, especially as a young rancher. And you hear all these people bragging about their 90+% breed ups in their heifers. And I told Burke, I said, I'm just not catching the mark. My neighbors seem to be able to breed heifers a lot more than me. I don't know if they're feeding them more mineral or what I'm not doing. And he said, what's your breed up? And I think I was like, 85%. And he told me the same thing. He's like, you're getting way too many bred. He said, how many are
Yeah.
you turning out? And I said, well, this. And he said, oh, is that all your heifers? And I said, no, that's like a quarter of them, maybe. I said, we just kind of picked the best ones. And he said, well, how do you pick them? I said, well, we eyeball. And he's like, turn them all out there. Don't get rid of one heifer. They're too valuable. They've got a lot of opportunities with heifers, and they never bring enough money. And, he had a million reasons why you keep every single heifer. And he said, the ones that don't breed, those are your most profitable animal. Just find a cheap system to grow them up in. And so we turned them out on the desert and gave them next to nothing and let them just graze out there. And then we started breeding every heifer at the ranch that we could kind of afford to keep. And we bred them, and we're getting 75% still is a good breed up year for me. And I remember my cowboys, the first year we did that, they were like, this is a wreck. And I was like, apparently this is perfect. This is what we're going for.
I warned my vet too that first year. I was like, just so you know, like our target is 65. So don't assume that this isn't going well because we have a new system in place here. And we'd started that like you did probably 10 years ago. And just looking back on how improved our cow herd is as a result of that, how much more color and flair is on our cow herd as well. But that's done more than anything to improve our cow herd over the last 10 years.
It's amazing. When you list these guys that ran these massive operations and made it profitable when they hadn't been profitable or as profitable, you start to realize that there's a lot of sense in what they're doing, especially after you've been doing it for 10 years. One thing he brought up yesterday that I thought was really interesting and makes even more sense in today's world when we're in such drought is with these halter collars, our opportunities to exclude our waters. And when I say exclude the water, what he was talking about was put a water tank up above your pond and have a solar pump system that pumps water at least on a 2-inch line, because it has to be enough water to water. In my scenario, like where all these heifers are in a group of 800 or 900, you need to have one tank that can do that. And we looked at several places yesterday, and I can do probably at least 3 or 4 tanks. And he's like, you can just spider off of these tanks around on these Forest Service permits. I mean, we're talking about big pastures, several thousand acres. And he said, yeah, just this many cattle, they can, if you have enough water pump flowing in there, said they can all live off of one tank. They don't need to all drink at 10 in the morning. They can wait their turn and do it. And he said that Emory Birdwell showed him that when he was down in visiting is it Birdwell Clark Ranch? And
Yeah.
he's watering like 6,000 head off of one tank. And
and it's a 40-foot old propane tank.
And so my tanks hold like 16,000 gallons is what most of the stuff I'm setting up in the country is. And so he said, oh, that's more than plenty. Just make sure you have at least a 2-inch line so they can get enough quantity of water into the tank for this many head. But keep those cattle out of the ponds and develop a trough away from it. And you want that so it goes in and comes right back out. You just want a circular system so they have fresh water. And he said, you can't believe the gains or the breed ups you'll get, or both, when you have fresh water in front of animals instead of just ponds that they're all wandering through. While we were sitting there talking about it, one of my bulls walks in, swims across the middle of this thing. And Burke had just asked me how deep it was. I'm like, oh, the middle is probably at least 8 or 10 feet. And this bull goes out there, and I mean, his nose was sticking up. He went all the way across and walked out and did a big old shake and got all the flies off of him, I guess. I don't know. But so it just, to iterate how much cleaner it is to get your animals into a tank rather than walking around and swimming through your ponds.
Yeah, we battle that as well. TJ's been battling that on the East Ranch with our cows, as we talked about with you. Our home raised steers will not jump in a tank. Our cows will not jump in a tank, but our purchase stock they are jumping in the tank. So TJ is actually going to make railing around at least our nice tanks that we've got. We've been setting those 15-foot fiberglass tanks. We're at least going to put railing around those that we do to kind of keep them out of the tanks. And he's been tackling that this summer, and Tino's going to kind of knock some of them out, specifically on that new property we bought. We're going to be setting tanks over there today, but keeping animals out of tanks is a huge deal because once they foul it up, those yearlings, they don't drink water. And if they don't drink water, they don't eat the grass. If they don't eat the grass, they don't gain. If they don't gain, you don't make money on it. And so it all starts at the water. And it's great that Burke, zeroed in on that on your place.
Yeah, and like your cattle are on a river and they have fresh water in front of them. If they go stand in the water, that's fine. It just went, down. But yours have fresh, and my cattle that I'm running on my forest permits are in a very different situation, and having fresh in front of them is a lot more challenging. Some other things you talked about, and we don't have to hit on this for a long time because you have to be kind of a grass nerd to get into this, but we talked about it briefly on the phone yesterday, that plants talk to each other. And when country is meant to be grazed quickly and moved off of, and if you don't, what happens is these plants start talking to each other and say, put your tannins up. And that goes to sagebrush, trees, bushes, and that's telling each other, hey, if you put your tannins up, which is not like they're growing a spike or something to poke an animal in the nose, but it's releasing something that makes it not taste as good within the plant's cycle. And so when you do continuous grazing, after it's been grazed once, they're all talking to each other, say, get your tannins up. And then the plants, especially some of the woody stuff that they want for their diet periodically, like sagebrush, it becomes less desirable for them. And then they start overgrazing your grasses, and, it kind of compounds and becomes a lot bigger problem if you're not continually rotating around. So,
Yeah, that's an interesting idea from Burke.
yeah, and I didn't even know what he was talking about. He's like, yeah, they're telling each other to get their tannins up. And I was like, Burke, we got to back up here. What's a tannin? So he, dumbed it down for me and held my hand through that. Let's see. He said, every cow should pay for herself any day of the year. And the only cows that don't pay for themselves are the ones that are called bred and they slough their calf before they have it. Those are the only cows that don't pay for themselves any day of the year. And every cow should be able to pay for herself or better every day of the year.
And one thing we started doing on Burke's advice is with all of our bred groups in the winter, we put bulls on all of them and they'll get fall bred. So when we were AI on those 200 first calf heifers, we've identified 3 that were heavy with calf. So those would have been the ones that sloughed in the winter, but they get covered and then we'll sell them as fall pairs here in September or October.
Yeah, and I've sent some cows out to you, like we were talking earlier, and just trying to get a little value added on that. And, what we learned is it's not worth sending anything that's above about 6 years old to do a rebreed if they're open. Certainly those first calf heifers that are open, it's a great opportunity for you to add some value to them, but don't keep them on your ranch once you get them bred. Get them gone, but that's a great opportunity to add some value to them.
Yes.
Keep development costs low. Open yearlings should be profitable. Calves, if she calves and is open, sell her for a heiferette price. So that was a good one. And then never play catch up, always be profitable. And what he's saying there is, don't keep those younger cows and try and give them another chance. Get them gone, because then you're playing catch up on her the rest of her life. And trying to get her to pay for herself was a big one. We talked about
that makes sense.
Protein, how much water a heifer drinks a day, which kind of goes back to putting in tanks. And it also goes to a feedlot system I'm trying to put in with kind of a limited water source, and how many heifers can I actually operate in the feedlot that I want to build. So I thought all of that was, really good. And he's always talking about heterosis. Don't just be Angus. Don't just be one thing or another. If you want, a beautiful black cow, you can do that, but you don't have to keep her one thing or another.
Yeah, he was the one that we're Hereford Angus, have been for a long time. And he was the one that's like, you really need to add some Continental to that British mix. The heterosis that you'll see with just a little dose of Continental will be worth a lot. And and we've done that. And that was also one of the reasons that we did this AI project, just to keep that Continental in there. And now African. So that'd be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
But he's a heterosis guy, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. And I think it's a benefit to our customers that are buying any cattle that come off of our ranch to get that heterosis as well. And our good friend Cooper Hibbard has an amazing crossbred program he's implemented. And he's got African breeds. He's got all sorts of stuff in there. And I've looked at his cattle and they're beautiful cattle.
Yeah. Yeah, they look great. I've seen them as well.
So
Yeah, and he does have an African breed in there. I should have looked it up, but it might have been the
yeah,
Shona.
well, we gotta you and me have a call with Cooper and just spit around and see what everybody's doing and what crazy ideas. Cooper was not able to make it to the WRM meeting this year, but he's always good to visit with because he's thinking way out of the box.
100%. Yeah, and he's into genetics too,
Yeah.
like I'm not. So he's a great resource in
Yeah, and
that.
he's done some stuff with plants, and there's very few ranchers that understand livestock and plants, and I think you're one of the few. But Cooper also gets the plant ID, and he really knows his plants. But you go into his fields, and he's got mixtures of stuff, and that's something we could talk about briefly. Is we talk about heterosis in our livestock. Why aren't we talking about heterosis in our pastures? And,
Yeah,
when you get this monoculture of just alfalfa or just Timothy hay or whatever you're doing, you're really doing yourself a disservice in your pasture lands because it takes each plant's doing something different for your soil. And it was really cool at the field day. I just picked a random place. We went out, we talked on the deck, we had lunch, and then we went out in and looked at the cattle, and we were kind of above them. They're down in a field below us. And we looked at them and they moved around and you could see that hard line, invisible line that was holding those cattle in there. But then we went down to a place they'd been a day and a half before. I already have dung beetles going to work. There's already holes in the manure. And that was really cool to see. And then we got on our hands and knees and pulled some of that grass apart like you and I have done when you were here. And there was so much seed sitting on top underneath all the grass, but right on that top layer of soil, there was just tons of seed sitting on there. And I didn't expect to see all that when I pulled it apart, but I think it really was an eye opener for the group. We had about 20 or so people come to the field day. It was really cool.
and these were your meadows?
Yeah, these are in my hay meadows that your cattle had been. This is the second time they'd been through there.
Cool. Yeah, which is super to describe it to people that don't have the lush meadows. I mean, it's just super productive, lush, wonderful, dense aggregate soils. So, I mean, really an asset for you guys.
Yeah, I think you'll appreciate this also. So I am putting up a little bit of hay just because hay prices are so out of sight. And I do have a lot of hay meadows. So we just cut probably a week or so of hay of grazing your cattle off because we needed the hay. And this field that we had historically hayed, and then we started using for like the last 3 years, probably we have not hayed it. And the guy that's putting up our hay, I saw him yesterday, and Burke was with me, and he cut the hay, and he's like, "Man, there's just so much in this understory. Like, there's a ton of understory here, which is making the tonnage really good." But he said some of the soil, I can't dry it out. It's too wet. And
Yeah.
that's because my soil is holding so much moisture now more than it ever did before. And, Burke and I got in the four-wheeler. Burke was kind of laughing about it. And we, to this guy that was putting up the hay, it was a bad thing because he couldn't get the hay dry as fast. But I just thought it was great because my soil has done so much better in holding that moisture.
Yeah. And you have to see that soil to kind of see what that's like because it's so aggregated that it's going to hold water for
Yeah,
weeks.
it'll oughta come right back. We're gonna put cows on it this fall, and it's a pasture right across the road from our headquarters, so a lot of times on shipping day, we will a day or 2 before we ship, we'll put those cattle in there, and it just grows so well and so fast in there, and it's across the road from our corral, so we can easily gather it up pretty quickly and have cows in the corral to ship the next morning, and so I think it'll grow back really well looking at what that soil looks like, even though it's been cut with a swather.
Yeah. It's nice that you have that asset and can use it both ways.
Yeah. Yeah, that was part of our original family homestead we were able to put back together about 15 years ago, and it's really been an asset to our operation to have another pasture that's really close to the house.
Yeah. What
So
else did you learn from Burke?
oh my gosh, the list is never ending, but we mostly talked about I my number one reason I wanted Burke to come out, and I will say he in true Burke form could not stand all of the questions without giving the proper answers at field day, which was so awesome for me because this guy who showed up and he was quiet for a long time. He just kind of listened to see what everybody was thinking and how it fit in the room like wise people do. And then we got down on the ground and the people had so many questions. And there were a few times I said, I think Burke's the guy to answer that question. I don't know the answer. And he just gave this long, very educated very thoughtful answer. And so he was a huge asset to the field day, even though he came to help me yesterday and get through my issues. But my issues were heifer replacements, heifer development, which him and I have talked about 50 times on the phone. And then also with our heifer breeding program and how we integrate all of that into one to keep both the best heifers for Ladder Ranch and then offer a great product to the customers that we're breeding heifers for. And I think we've come up with a game plan I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah, Burke is second to none when it comes to heifer
Yeah,
development. And
same. I introduced him to the guy putting up our hay who also ranches. I said, if you have any heifer development questions, this is the guy. And I think he was like, shoot, I wish I'd thought of something before you pulled up here. But yeah, it was very good and enjoyed Burke immensely. And Understanding Ag really has a great crew. And there's a guy named Fernando Valamir, I think is his last name, and he's going to be at our friend Davey Barron's next Saturday. And I'm going to try and go down to that field day. And I think he gets a little deeper into the soil stuff than Burke did.
nice. That'd be
Yeah.
awesome.
Oh, I wanted to throw out to you. So I bought those four-wheelers and
Yeah.
I got a Can-Am it's got the truck bed and it's a single cab up front. And
Yep.
I think that'll be great for some of our fencing operations and putting out mineral and things like that. But I asked about the sit-on top four-wheeler ATVs that are electric, and they said that you have
Mhm.
to be a special vendor, and Laramie, Wyoming is not one because of our cold issue that we have in Wyoming. And they said we probably won't ever sell electric four-wheelers, and at least for
Interesting. Makes sense
yeah.
though.
So if you're going to go get electric, you're going to have to start doing your research on who's going to be the vendors.
Yeah, and I've had a couple people reach out because we shared that video, and we're not there today. I couldn't go all electric today, but I'm pretty sure in 5 years we can get
Yeah.
there.
I had a hybrid pickup at one point, a F-150 hybrid, and I really liked the truck. And people all the time are like, well, do you have trouble with it starting? And I said, it runs just like a gas truck. And when I want the electric out of it, I can manage how I'm driving the truck to get better fuel mileage. One great opportunity is coming down from Eisenhower Tunnel down into Denver, where it's a long downhill stretch. You can do that on next to no fuel.
Yeah.
So that's anytime that, you were driving and just not pushing your pedal all the time, because we all use a lot more fuel than we need to. I was coming into Laramie yesterday and didn't realize I hadn't fueled up when I left and came in on fumes yesterday. But I got to the top of the pass coming down into Woods Landing and just put it neutral and kind of just coasted on
Coasted it down.
down. And I did make it into Laramie, but I wasn't willing to go to the second gas station, which is my preferred gas station. Well, I don't have a whole lot more. I think we covered a lot of good stuff here. And
Yeah, we did. We
I
got Burke and Wayne. Burke and Wayne featured heavily. I think it's going to be a winner. So
yeah.
let's wrap it up, Eamon.
Yeah, well, we'll put together some stuff for next week, and we haven't talked a whole lot, but the markets are doing they're not really helping anybody on the market side, but I think live cattle sales are still up and things are still looking good. I think there's a lot of promise and hope for the future of the cattle industry, and the numbers
Yeah,
reflect that.
let's do an update next week because, like you said, the futures are discounted, but the barn prices are coming down, but not as heavily as the futures. But let's do a market update next week
That sounds
when we
good.
get together.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks, Logan. It was good to catch up.
Keep running on grass.
Adios.